Hey everyone! Tonight we're diving into the surprisingly well-documented yet frequently misrepresented daily reality of Roman sex workers. Before you settle in, hit that like button if you're enjoying this content and subscribe, but only if you genuinely appreciate what we're doing here. Drop a comment about where you're watching from and your local time. It's always fascinating to see our global audience. Now, dim those lights, maybe turn on a fan for some ambient background noise, and let's begin tonight's immersive journey together. Imagine waking up, or more accurately, regaining consciousness, in a space barely large enough to turn around without scraping the walls. Congratulations, you're now living in an ancient Roman cellar, the original work-from-home setup. If your home was a glorified broom closet and your job required liberal amounts of body oil, these cramped quarters served as both living space and workplace for many of Rome's working women, typically located in brothels, lapainers, or stacked above taverns and bathhouses. Picture the world's most depressing studio apartment designed by someone who despised light, air, and personal privacy. Your bed consists of flea-infested straw that faintly reeks of wine, smoke, and shattered dreams. If you're fortunate, there's a small oil lamp, and if you're exceptionally lucky, it hasn't been stolen yet. Your meager possessions, some cheap cosmetics, a comb, maybe a bronze mirror if business has been good, get shoved into a corner like they're as exhausted with this existence as you are. Forget modern conveniences. No running water, no plumbing, just a bucket you try not to think about too hard. Bathing. That becomes a communal activity at the nearest public bathhouse where the water's shared and the awkward eye contact comes free of charge. But there's no time for leisurely soaking because your tiny room doubles as your workplace, and business hours are whenever someone knocks, or more likely barges in unannounced. Privacy? That's a modern luxury. In ancient Rome, walls were merely suggestions and doors were basically decorative. Most mornings begin with the glamorous task of cleaning up yesterday's debris, sweeping out dust, wine stains, and the occasional abandoned sandal left behind by last night's clientele. Then comes the transformation, slathering on face powder, rouge, and enough perfume to qualify as a fire hazard. You're not aiming to smell good exactly, just marginally better than the guy waiting in line behind you. You practice your best sultry half-smile in that bronze mirror. Not because it's particularly effective, but because the act of pretending helps maintain the illusion. That one time a client described you as charmingly awake still gives you an emotional high weeks later. Because in this cellar existence, every day starts the same, cramped, rushed, and clinging to just enough dignity to make it till lunchtime. After emerging from your glorified storage space, it's time to prepare for another day of impressing clients while dodging public judgment. First comes hygiene, or what passed for it in ancient Rome. Forget private bathrooms. That luxury was reserved for the wealthy, who basically just had fancy chamber pots anyway. As a working girl in a city that worshipped marble statues but tolerated open sewers, your options were the public fountain or the bathhouse, depending on your tolerance for awkward nudity. Short on time, which you always are. The quick fountain rinse it is. Splash some questionable water on your face. Maybe rinse your mouth with wine if you're feeling fancy, and pray nobody used it to clean poultry earlier. Soap hasn't been invented yet, but you might have some natron, a salty cleaning powder that exfoliates both your skin and your self-respect. If business is decent and your coin purse jingles a bit, you might splurge on the public baths, Rome's great social equalizer where merchants, soldiers, philosophers, and that guy who overshares about his hemorrhoids all mingle together. You undress, stash your belongings in a niche you're foolishly trusting, and wade into tepid water containing equal parts philosophical debates and someone else's toenails. After sweating in the steam room and scraping yourself with a strigil, that curved metal blade Romans loved, you enjoy approximately 5 minutes of being the cleanest person on your street before reality sets in. Post-bath, you dry off, apply more perfume, since deodorant hasn't been invented yet, and begin the cosmetic ritual, chalk-based face powder, rouge for cheeks and lips, kohl around the eyes. This isn't about enhancing beauty so much as disguising exhaustion. Clients don't want to see the woman who's already serviced 3 senators and a sailor before noon. They want fantasy, allure, and someone who doesn't smell like yesterday's lentil stew. Now for the fashion statement that leaves nothing to the imagination, the female toga. While we associate togas with senators and frat parties, in Rome a woman wearing one was sending a very specific professional message. This was essentially a walking billboard announcing, "I'm not a respectable matron and my services are negotiable." Respectable Roman women wore stolas, those long, layered dresses that screamed, "My husband controls my dowry and I'm in bed by 9." Prostitutes? By law they were denied stolas and forced to wear togas, often short, brightly colored, and designed to be visible from across the forum. Think less Grecian goddess and more human neon sign. The ensemble typically came accessorized with cheap jewelry, bronze or glass beads, maybe some flashy earrings. The goal wasn't elegance, but visibility. When you're competing with 20 other women in a 100-meter radius, subtlety is a luxury you can't afford. Footwear? Maybe simple sandals, possibly barefoot depending on budget and location. Comfort wasn't prioritized. You'd be spending most days standing, walking, or occasionally sprinting away from problematic clients or overzealous moralists. Hair became its own production. Roman sex workers frequently curled, dyed, or wore wigs, especially blonde ones imported from Gaul, as blonde hair carried exotic appeal, sort of like imported luxury soap, but attached to a person. The finishing touches? More makeup, pale face powder to contrast with red lips and cheeks, thick kohl eyeliner to make eyes pop, or at least look less sleep-deprived. Once fully dressed, you looked exactly like what you were, and that was the whole point. In a city of 1 million people, your outfit was your business card. If it made you look bold, scandalous, and economically available, congratulations, you were ready for another day of being simultaneously judged and financially supported by society. So now you're dressed, painted, perfumed, and hopefully not too hungover. Time for the fun part. Drumming up business in a city where everyone wants sex but pretends to be shocked it's for sale. Ancient Roman marketing wasn't subtle. No pamphlets, no websites, definitely no branding consultants. If you wanted clients, you needed visibility, volume, or graffiti immortality, preferably all three. Location strategy came first. If you worked in a Lepaner brothel, your workplace was already optimized for visibility, typically situated near bathhouses, markets, or drinking establishments where people were already sweaty, bored, or easily persuaded. Picture ancient foot traffic conversion tactics. Standing in the doorway in your most attention-grabbing outfit, you'd call out to passers-by with a mix of flattery, negotiation, and time-sensitive offers. 2 denarii if you're quick. Might sound desperate, but when rent's due and the girl next door just dropped her rates to 1 denarius, you do what you must. Freelancers roamed for visibility, maybe hovering near temples, because nothing inspires divine inspiration like temptation, or taverns where tipsy legionaries with questionable judgment and leftover coins might be persuaded. But perhaps the most bizarre yet effective marketing? Well, graffiti. Pompeii preserved these ancient Yelp reviews scrawled on brothel walls. Maritimus gave me the best night ever. Or Felicia, 2 denarii, very fast service. Some women paid scribes to advertise their specialties near tavern entrances or on columns, while others let satisfied clients do the promotion, with reviews ranging from glowing praise to poetic complaints about being robbed. The takeaway? A sex worker's survival depended as much on marketing as skill. If people didn't know your name, rates, and approximate enthusiasm level, someone else got the business. Because in ancient Rome as now, success wasn't always about talent. Sometimes it just came down to better PR. Let's talk money. Because in ancient Rome, even the world's oldest profession had its price lists and economic realities. Welcome to the unregulated marketplace where supply, demand, and whatever you could negotiate determined your worth. And let's be clear, there were no unions, no standardized rates, just whatever you could squeeze from a client before they tried to barter you down with a stale loaf of bread. For street-level workers, or those in low-end Lepaners, prices could plunge as low as 1 or 2 asses, the small bronze coins, not the body parts, though sometimes the distinction blurred. That's right, some clients paid less than the price of a decent lunch. If that sounds depressing, remember some women accepted payment in food, sandals, or empty promises. Because in an empire overflowing with currency, the oldest form of payment, you, never went out of style. On the flip side, high-end courtesans, meretresses, operated like luxury brands. These women commanded silver denarii, sometimes multiple coins per client, especially if they offered more than basic services. Conversation, music, poetry recitals, basic literacy. Anything that let a client pretend this wasn't purely transactional. Some specialists developed niche markets. Maybe you excelled with sailors, performed erotic dances, or, bizarrely, recited poetry during the act. Don't laugh. Ovid probably inspired someone. The more unique your brand, the harder you were to replace. Repeat customers might score discounts, or not, depending on whether they paid promptly or reeked of fermented cabbage. And if you worked under a pimp, leno, or brothel owner, a hefty chunk of your earnings vanished before you saw a single coin. The truly unfortunate were enslaved workers who didn't get paid at all, just basic food and shelter with vague promises of future freedom if they somehow struck it rich. Welcome to the Lepainer Lottery. Speaking of Lepainers, let's tour Rome's version of a brothel. It's not luxurious, but having walls already puts it a step above working behind a tavern. Technically a place of business, realistically it's a sweaty stone maze of questionable decisions. The term Lepainer comes from lupa, she-wolf, Rome's charming slang for prostitutes. Because nothing says empowerment like being compared to a wild animal. Most Lepainers were two-story buildings wedged between bathhouses and bars, perfect for catching foot traffic from tipsy senators and bored sailors. Inside, a narrow hallway lined with tiny rooms featuring stone beds, thin mattresses, and just enough space for existential crises. No doors, just curtains for that open floor plan vibe, because privacy was for rich matrons. You had damp linen dividers and the soothing sounds of your neighbor snoring through the wall. You're never alone, of course. A proper Lepainer housed several workers and one delightful parasite, the leno, pimp, or lena, madam. Their job? Skim your earnings, promise repairs that never materialize, and occasionally yell helpful critiques like, work faster. He's important. Clients ranged from nervous teenagers to sweaty legionaries to balding senators claiming this was purely academic. Some were in and out faster than a dropped denarius. Others wanted to discuss their poetry, which was arguably worse. Downtime meant sitting near the entrance perfecting your flirty but dead inside expression while catcalling passersby. Marketing was volume-based. 2 coins special today. I'll pretend to listen. And yes, the walls were covered in graffiti. Ancient Yelp reviews etched for posterity. Felix was here twice, or Thais gives good time. Occasionally someone got artistic and drew. Creative illustrations, accuracy varied, but confidence never wavered. Working a Lepainer wasn't glamorous, but it was consistent. A roof, sort of, a bed, if you squinted, and front row seats to humanity's weirdest parade. Not every Roman sex worker worked in brothels, though. Some opted for the equally glamorous tavern scene. If Lepainers were chaotic office cubicles, taverns were like working at a startup with more vomit and fewer stock options. Taverns, Caponi or Popini, gathered Rome's finest drunk merchants, off-duty soldiers, and guys named Gaius with gambling debts. For sex workers here, the motto was simple: serve wine, sell charm, dodge gropes. A typical shift involved pouring watered-down wine into questionable cups while simultaneously flirting just enough to keep coins flowing, but not so much it started brawls, unless the brawl was entertaining. Then carry on. Unlike brothels, taverns were technically food establishments, meaning your workplace smelled like boiled cabbage, fish sauce, and poor life choices. This aromatic bouquet clung to your tunic and soul, but did allow for creative upselling. 2 extra coins, and I'll pretend you don't smell like garum. Some women worked back rooms or upstairs areas, turning taverns into part-time brothels with table service. Others kept it casual with lap-sitting and strategic compliments. Your toga looks clean. High praise in Rome. Payment was cash only. Credit didn't exist. If clients tried to delay, your options were yell, threaten, or grab the bouncer, usually a one-eyed ex-gladiator with anger issues. The upside? Taverns offered better foot traffic and sometimes better tips. The downside? You were equal parts waitress, therapist, and hostage negotiator, with no extra pay for emotional labor. Then there were the free agents. No brothel affiliation, just entrepreneurial spirit and questionable life choices. Freelance prostitution in Rome meant walking the fine line between independent contractor and please don't arrest me. The streets teemed with opportunity and sewage. These prostibuli roamed alleys, bathhouse entrances, markets, and even temple steps, because nothing says divine blessing like offering discounts near Venus' shrine. Daylight hours brought decent traffic but higher risks. Navigating gawkers, nosy magistrates, and angry matrons convinced you were corrupting their husbands. Spoiler, you weren't. Your outfit had to stand out. Short tunics, flashy jewelry, maybe a German hair wig. This wasn't subtle elegance. It was visible from the Circus Maximus marketing. The goal? Catch a client's eye before his wife did. Approaching customers required finesse, smile, compliment his sandals, mention your rate before the vigiles, street guards, decided your entrepreneurship constituted public disorder. Clients ranged from polite to aggressively cheap to just plain lost. Is this the bathhouse? You learned to read them fast, usually by how many coins they jingled. Competition was brutal, not just other streetwalkers, but free lovers, drunk party girls, and gladiators with side hustles. Everyone wanted those denarii. There were no benefits, no security, just your wits, your charm, and the ability to sprint in sandals. Some carried small knives or befriended tavern bouncers. Others prayed tonight's customers weren't philosophers with commitment issues. But despite the chaos, street work had perks. Set your own hours. Keep all profits. No lino breathing down your neck. Sure, you might encounter drunk goats or poetic hecklers, but at least you were your own boss in a city where bosses were rarely the good guys. Just when you thought ancient Rome couldn't get more bureaucratic, meet your least favorite client, the tax collector. That's right, even the world's oldest profession couldn't escape the long arm of Roman taxation. The empire, brilliant engineers, conquerors of the Mediterranean, inventors of the toga, also pioneered a dedicated tax on sex work. The vectigal ex capitibus, literally tax on heads, ensured even your most awkward encounters contributed to Rome's infrastructure projects. Congratulations, your nightly services just funded another aqueduct. This wasn't some back alley shakedown either. The vectigal was state-sanctioned, managed by professional tax farmers called publicani, men who somehow made accounting both boring and terrifying. They kept meticulous records, demanded cash payments, and probably judged your perfume choices while scribbling on their wax tablets. To operate legally, sex workers had to register with the aediles, Rome's version of city inspectors with a paperwork fetish. Get listed on the official roll of sex workers. Think of it as joining a trade union where instead of a membership card you got branded. Literally. Yes, some sex workers, especially enslaved ones, received tattoos or brands marking them as lupa, she-wolf, or their owner's name. If you're wondering how clients felt about this, don't worry, the branding wasn't for them. It was to ensure you could never pass as respectable later. As for tax rates, they fluctuated based on location, class, and whether your clients were melancholy senators or bargain-hunting gladiators. But it always stung. You paid per transaction or weekly depending on region, with no deductions for emotional labor, awkward silences, or existential dread. Refusing to pay could mean fines, imprisonment, or being barred from working, though enforcement was spotty, especially if you knew how to flirt with an aedile. Still, for a profession already drowning in stigma, this tax added insult to injury. Rome essentially said, "We disapprove of your lifestyle. Now give us 10%. But look on the bright side. At least your labor might be funding a temple. probably dedicated to some goddess who'd never answer your prayers anyway. In Rome, prostitution existed in legal limbo, officially tolerated yet socially condemned. You had government permission to work and society's permission to be endlessly judged. Enter the moral police, not an official squad with batons, but a vast unpaid network of senators, priests, matrons, and writers who considered shaming you their divine duty, while quietly enjoying your services after dark. At the hypocrisy pyramid's peak sat the Roman Senate, aging elites preaching about moral decay between brothel visits. Many publicly condemned vice while maintaining tabs at every lupanar from the Forum to Subura. Then came the aediles, actual officials who enforced laws on cleanliness and decency. Their job? Regulate brothels, inspect establishments, and occasionally fine women for being too obvious about their profession, which was legally required to be obvious. You couldn't win. Writers like Juvenal and Seneca had field days. They mocked sex workers in verse, lumping them with greedy merchants and, horror of horrors, women who read books. Yet these same men gave suspiciously detailed brothel descriptions, almost like they'd done research. Even Roman matrons got in on the action. They'd never speak to you directly, but could sterilize fig trees with their glare. Some petitioned to ban prostitutes from wearing jewelry or entering public baths, rich coming from women whose husbands treated bathhouses like part-time jobs. Working as a Roman sex worker came with occupational hazards beyond social stigma. Disease, injury, and whatever that sailor from Brundisium left behind were constant threats. Welcome to ancient healthcare where the treatment plan was basically, hope you survive. First up, venereal diseases. While germ theory was centuries away, Romans knew some clients left more than coins and bad poetry. Medical texts describe symptoms from persistent itching to things falling off that shouldn't. Treatments? Vinegar washes, herbal ointments, and desperate prayers to Venus. Pregnancy was another ever-present worry. No birth control pills here. Options included silphium, an extinct plant famously over-harvested for this purpose. Animal intestine condoms. Wool tampons soaked in dubious herbal concoctions. Effectiveness ranged from maybe to miracle. If pregnancy happened, things got complicated. Some women raised children within brothels. Others used foundling homes or less official methods. Infanticide wasn't legal, but officials excelled at looking the other way. For everyday ailments, sore muscles, cuts, stress-induced rage, the go-to remedies were wine, opium, or a slap from your Leno telling you to stop whining. If that failed, maybe visit an Asclepius temple for a healing dream, ancient medicine's version of a mystical nap with side effects. Infections ran rampant in a world without gloves, antiseptics, basic hand washing. The emotional toll, depression, trauma, anxiety, all part of the job description. Rome didn't have therapists. You had fellow workers, wine, and the occasional stray cat that listened without judgment. In a society that blamed gods for everything from floods to flatulence, sex workers weren't just dodging moral condemnation. They were trying to stay on the deity's good sides, or at least bribe them for health, decent clients, and good luck. Roman religion was a full-time job with gods always watching and judging. The divine lineup had a few figures more sympathetic to your profession. First came Venus, goddess of love, beauty, and questionable decisions. Many workers kept small altars with offerings of flowers, perfume, or coins hoping for wealthy, non-smelly clients. Then there was Fortuna, goddess of luck, essential when your income varied from gold bracelets to 3 moldy grapes and a promise. Some wore her likeness as a charm or mumbled prayers before encountering overly groomed sandal wearers. But religion had its dark side too, superstitions, omens, and magical countermeasures. Because when in doubt, blame the spirits. Workers might burn incense against the evil eye, tie red cords around ankles for protection, hire witches to curse rivals' hairline. Seriously, curse tablets found in brothel districts read like ancient Yelp revenge reviews. May her tongue rot. May clients desert her. May she trip into donkeydom. Enslaved workers might pray to Mercury, god of commerce, Because your whole life was one long receipt? Or Libertas, goddess of freedom, if saving to buy emancipation? All this spiritual effort wasn't just tradition. It was survival with flair. When Rome gave you judgment, disease, and rude senators, the gods were your HR department, mostly useless, occasionally helpful, always accepting offerings. Love in the Roman underworld of sex work was complicated. At best, it was a pleasant delusion. At worst, a financial liability wrapped in a toga. Clients fell in love constantly, or claimed to, usually around their third cup of wine mid-monologue about their mother. "But baby, I'm different," they'd slur, clutching your hand like a tragic poet. You'd nod politely while mentally calculating how much they still owed you. Some workers caught feelings too, or at least faked it convincingly. Emotional labor came with the territory. Smile through his bad breath, pretend interest in his poetry, act impressed by his unique sandal tan lines. For regulars, you might develop something resembling affection or just mutual exhaustion. But romance was dangerous, especially since Roman law classified you as infamous, disgraced, barring marriage to citizens even if you wanted to. Not that this stopped anyone from trying. History records tales of sex workers who believed clients' promises of freedom and houses with gardens, fell for poets who vanished when someone with better eyeliner appeared, actually got manumission, freedom, from smitten patrons, the exception, not the rule. Among co-workers, real bonds formed. You shared lice, insults, and survival strategies. Some friendships became sisterhoods. Others turned into quiet romantic partnerships hidden from Rome's patriarchal gaze, which insisted women could only love men with sword collections. Then there were the lies you told yourself. Next year I'll quit. He'll really leave his wife. If I save enough, I'll open that perfume shop in Ostia. Maybe not true, but in Rome, everyone needed fantasies. Yours just came with better lighting. As beauty faded and youth waned, Roman sex workers faced the inevitable, aging out. But disappearing wasn't an option. Some fortunate few, through savings or miraculously loyal patrons, bought freedom, if enslaved, and reinvented themselves. The luckiest became tavern owners, bathhouse proprietors, renting rooms to the next desperate generation. Leanus, madams, the brothel version of corporate management, less sex, more shouting. As a Lena, you didn't need beauty, just sharp eyes, a sharper tongue, and fluency in threats involving overdue debts. Workers feared you, clients respected you, sort of, and Edile sighed when you approached. Other retirees pivoted to fortune-telling. After hearing every sob story in Rome, predicting doom was easy. Wise woman herbalists, your medical knowledge was 10% effective, 90% confidence. Unofficial therapists, because everyone needed to vent about their terrible spouses. But many kept working because Rome didn't do pensions. Older workers adapted their marketing, less blushing virgin, more experienced, discreet, and tolerates bad poetry. Reputation mattered, known for conversation or astrology skills. You could stay in demand past your prime. For those without savings or luck, options dwindled to begging, cleaning temples, or working fields until your hands resembled dried olives. Rome didn't care how you aged, just that you did it quietly. But here's the truth they didn't carve into marble. Survival itself was victory. If you reached old age with your wit intact and one functional sandal, you were already legendary. When people imagine ancient Rome, they picture marble statues, grand speeches, and emperors with creative family trees. What they rarely see is the woman leaning in a brothel doorway, adjusting her wig while calculating how many coins she needs to not starve next week. Roman sex workers didn't lurk in shadows. History shoved them there, editing them out of noble narratives so schoolchildren could learn about aqueducts without awkward questions. Yet they were everywhere. In graffiti, Metella was here, worth every coin. Legal records, tax rolls, court cases. Satire, juveniles' rants. Love letters. Meet me where the red lanterns. Curse tablets. May her clients dry up. Even receipts, actual accounting ledgers. What history gets wrong is reducing these women to two stereotypes: powerless victims or morally bankrupt seductresses. Reality was messier. Many were savvy entrepreneurs, better at business than half the Senate. They could read clients like scrolls, negotiate terms, spot danger, hustle in a city that cheered gladiators but stoned you for wearing the wrong shoes. And they weren't monolithic. Some were enslaved, others free. Some catered to elites. Others serviced whoever had 2 coins and questionable hygiene. Some hated every moment. Others carved out pockets of autonomy. Most existed in the gray space between, like everyone in Rome, pretending they weren't exhausted. Their stories were rarely self-recorded. Instead, they survived through poets needing metaphors, moralists clutching pearls, archaeologists deciphering Pompeii's raunchiest graffiti, lawyers' case notes about disputed payments. But here's what's remarkable. They're still visible if you look closely. In stone carvings, sarcastic graffiti, legal loopholes, and offhand mentions in love poems. These women were erased from respectability, but not reality. They worked, laughed, scammed, wept, and endured, without marble statues or gilded tombs. Just faint ink on crumbling walls declaring, "I existed." So next time someone romanticizes Rome's glory, remember, behind every toga-clad philosopher was a working girl keeping both the economy and gossip alive. The empire built roads and laws, but she built something more elusive, a life on her own terms in a world determined to deny her dignity. And that, perhaps, was the most Roman triumph of all. In the shadowy corners of Roman society, where respectable citizens pretended not to look, sex workers developed their own intricate support networks. These weren't official guilds with charters and meeting halls, but rather organic systems of mutual aid that could mean the difference between survival and disaster. When one woman fell ill, others would cover her shifts. When a new girl arrived bewildered from the provinces, veterans taught her the unwritten rules. And when someone finally saved enough to buy freedom, the whole brothel might celebrate with watered-down wine and stolen pastries. The most vulnerable were the enslaved workers, legally classified as property rather than people. Their lives depended entirely on their owners' whims. One bad month, and you might be sold to a gladiator troupe or worse. But even here, small rebellions flourished. Experienced women taught newcomers how to hide coins in hair ornaments or hollowed out cosmetic jars. Fake illnesses convincingly when truly exhausted. Identify which clients might help with legal troubles. Spot early signs of pregnancy and discreetly seek remedies. Free workers faced different struggles. Without a Leno taking half their earnings, they had more control, but also more responsibility. Rent, food, bribes to local officials, medical care. Everything came from their own purses. Many formed loose collectives, renting shared rooms near the baths or circus where they could. Pool resources for better accommodations. Take turns watching each other's belongings. Share warnings about violent clients. Provide childcare during working hours. These networks extended beyond immediate co-workers. Tavern keepers might extend credit to regulars. Bath attendants could provide discreet meeting spaces. Even the occasional sympathetic matron might donate old clothing or offer temporary shelter during crises. Everyone understood the precariousness of their position. Today's generous patron could be tomorrow's accuser. Medical knowledge circulated through these networks like underground currency. With no access to proper physicians, sex workers developed their own pharmacopoeia, pennyroyal and silphium for unwanted pregnancies, vinegar-soaked sponges as rudimentary barriers, honey and garlic poultices for infections, poppy tears mixed in wine for pain relief. Some remedies worked better than others, and the line between medicine and superstition often blurred. A favored amulet might be just as important as an herbal compress when treating heartbreak or exhaustion. What mattered was having something to offer when the alternative was suffering in silence. The legal system posed constant threats, but the networks provided some defense. When a worker faced accusations, whether legitimate or fabricated, others might provide alibis, pool money for bribes, testify about a client's character. Hide the accused until tempers cooled. These strategies weren't foolproof. Roman justice heavily favored the wealthy and connected, but they offered better odds than facing the system alone. Even something as simple as knowing which officials could be flattered versus which demanded cash could save a woman from imprisonment or worse. Perhaps most importantly, these networks preserved dignity in a world determined to strip it away. Inside a crowded insular room or brothel cubicle, women could share jokes at clients' expense, complain about aching feet without judgment, mourn lost children, dream aloud about better futures. For a few precious hours, they weren't in fames or loopy, they were just people. That simple humanity, so easily overlooked in historical accounts, may have been their most subversive act of all. The streets of Rome never slept, and neither did the city's moral guardians. While philosophers debated ethics in marble halls, a very different reality played out in the brothels and alleyways where sex workers plied their trade. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. The same senators who funded temples to Venus and Bacchus would later rail against moral decay in speeches carefully crafted for public consumption. For sex workers, this meant navigating a labyrinth of double standards. The same act that could earn you a beating from the vigiles, city guards, one night might be quietly rewarded with silver coins the next, provided the right connections were maintained. Survival required mastering several unwritten codes. The geography of discretion. Certain areas like the Subura district operated under tacit approval, while others near patrician villas or temples demanded absolute invisibility. Smart workers kept mental maps of where and when they could operate safely. The baths were particularly tricky, technically public spaces, but the private rooms saw constant traffic. Many established elaborate alibis as massage therapists, I just rub his sore shoulders. Hairdressers, she needed her wig adjusted. Dance instructors, the senator's wife requested lessons. The hierarchy of clients. Not all customers were equal. Ranking them properly could mean the difference between prosperity and peril. Senators and equites, paid well but dangerous if angered. Soldiers, rough but usually honest about payment. Foreign merchants, often generous, less connected. Freedmen, eager to prove status through lavish spending. Slaves, risky, their masters might claim extortion. The theater of respectability. Even in the most squalid Lapaner, maintaining appearances mattered. Workers developed elaborate backstories. Widows supporting elderly parents. Freedwomen paying off debts. Artisans' daughters fallen on hard times. The more plausible the story, the more leniency one might receive when inevitably caught in some moral crackdown. Some even cultivated relationships with local priests, making small donations to temples in exchange for occasional interventions. Festivals presented both opportunities and dangers. During the Floralia, April, and Lupercalia, February, sexual license was temporarily tolerated, even celebrated. Workers could operate openly, their services almost sanctified by tradition. But the morning after? Back to being scapegoats for society's sins. The wise saved their earnings from these occasions, knowing winter would bring renewed moralizing. Pregnancy posed particular challenges. Some lean-ons forced continued work until late terms, while others locked expectant women away until they could be presentable again. The luckiest might find temporary shelter with midwives or sympathetic landladies. But many resorted to dangerous remedies, pennyroyal teas, strenuous exercise, even self-inflicted abdominal trauma, rather than face the alternatives. Abandoned infants at the Columna Lactaria, sailed to slave traders, complete loss of income. Through it all, the greatest survival skill was reading the city's mercurial moods. A joke that would earn laughter during Saturnalia might bring lashes in Lent. A hairstyle that seemed modest in July could be deemed provocative in December. The true professionals became masters of this dance, visible enough to attract clients, invisible enough to avoid notice when the moral winds shifted. In the dim light of oil lamps, Rome's sex workers perfected an entire silent language, a system of gestures, accessories, and coded phrases that could mean the difference between safety and disaster. This underground communication network evolved from necessity, allowing information to flow under the noses of authorities and abusive clients alike. The dress code spoke volumes before a single word was exchanged. Gold ankle chains signified a free woman. Enslaved workers wore iron. Red ribbons in hair indicated availability. Blue veil meant currently with client, do not disturb. Left sandal slightly loose, warned of difficult customer inside. Overturned wine cup by doorway signaled danger from authorities. Hand signals developed for crowded markets or noisy taverns. Touching right earlobe. This client pays well. Rubbing left elbow. Customer is violent. Stay clear. 3 fingers against lips. Magistrate nearby. Stop soliciting. Tapping nose twice. He's fallen asleep. Easy money. Even cosmetics carried hidden messages. White lead foundation with rouge meant high-end services available. Kohl only on upper eyelids signaled only quick encounters. Saffron-dyed hair indicated Greek specialty services. Henna patterns on hands showed pregnancy termination skills. The graffiti system near popular Le Painters functioned as an early review platform. Felicia Benet, Felicia does well. With 3 scratches equals reliable provider. Cave Quintum, beware Quintus, with cross dagger equals violent client. Hick dormant, he sleeps here, equals good tipper who dozes off. Mentula, penis with owl drawing equals complains about performance. At the public baths, where much business was conducted, workers developed elaborate rituals. Sending a slave girl with sponge and strigil meant meet in third alcove. Floating certain flowers in the warm bath indicated price ranges. Leaving a comb on the bench signaled interested in female clients. Dropping a coin in a particular fountain meant urgent meeting needed. This silent language proved particularly vital during periodic crackdowns by authorities. When the Ediles launched one of their moral purification campaigns, warnings would ripple through the Subura within hours. Barbers would stop sharpening razors. Tavern keepers would remove certain amphorae from display. Street vendors would suddenly rearrange their carts. Even the beggars would change their usual positions. Those who couldn't read these signs often ended up fined, imprisoned, or worse. The savvy ones, they'd simply vanish for a few days, visiting sick relatives in the countryside until the storm passed. Perhaps most remarkably, this communication system crossed class lines. A wealthy matron seeking discreet services could use the same gestures as a dock worker looking for cheap relief. The language accommodated all, from the enslaved girl forced to stand in a brothel doorway to the elite courtesan whose villa appointments required 3 weeks' notice. In a society that denied them legal protections, Rome's sex workers created something far more powerful, a living, evolving means of survival that outlasted emperors and empires. The real Latin wasn't being taught in rhetorical schools. It was being whispered in shadows, scrawled on walls, and passed from one generation of outcasts to the next. In the shadowed corners of Roman bedrooms, sex workers developed an intricate understanding of power dynamics that would make modern psychologists take notes. Their profession required navigating a minefield of client psychology, where a misread glance or poorly timed laugh could mean lost income or worse. The truly skilled became masters of emotional alchemy, transforming base desires into golden opportunities. The theater of desire. Every encounter demanded careful staging. Lighting adjusted with oil lamps to highlight assets and hide flaws. Strategic placement of mirrors to create illusions of space. Scented oils chosen specifically for each client's preferences. Background music, flutes or lyres, calibrated to desired pace. The best performers maintained entire repertoires. The shy virgin, for men needing conquest fantasies. The experienced courtesan, for those seeking sophistication. The aggressive dominatrix, rare but highly paid specialty. The economy of flattery. Compliments became currency. Your Latin puts poets to shame, to barely literate merchants. The gods shaped your body as perfection to flabby officials. Your wife is the envy of Rome, to notorious bachelors. Savvy workers kept mental ledgers of which lies yielded the best tips. adjusting their performances like actors in an endless play. The dance of rejection. Saying no required artistry. My heart breaks, but the temple vows forbid me tonight. Your magnificence deserves fresher pleasures than I can offer. The stars warn me this would bring you misfortune. The truly desperate developed emergency signals, a particular cough or curtain adjustment that would bring coworkers running with urgent messages. The aftercare rituals, post-coital moments held danger and opportunity. Listening to political rants, many secrets were spilled in exhaustion. Pretending interest in bad poetry, some clients paid extra for literary critique. Offering prophetic dreams, a lucrative side hustle. The most successful workers understood this was when tips were decided and repeat business secured. The trauma management. Violence lurked beneath the surface of many transactions. Defensive strategies included keeping nails sharpened for emergency use, learning pressure points to disable attackers, developing relationships with bathhouse attendants who could intervene, maintaining retirement funds hidden in hollowed-out hairpins. Some specialized in damage control for assaulted coworkers, providing herbal compresses for bruises, connections to discreet midwives, loans to cover forced downtime. The psychological toll manifested in ways even the Stoics couldn't anticipate. Nightmares featuring endless faceless clients, involuntary flinching at familiar scents, developing separate personalities for work and private moments. Yet amidst this darkness, moments of genuine connection sometimes flickered. The elderly widower who just wanted to talk about his late wife. The young bride nervously seeking advice before her wedding night. The occasional client who actually asked, "Are you all right?" These rare sparks of humanity became lifelines. Proof that beneath the commerce and performance, something resembling real human interaction could still exist. The smartest workers learned to nurture these moments without becoming dependent on them, a balancing act as delicate as walking a tightrope over the forum. The twilight years of a Roman sex worker's career presented challenges that required reinvention or resilience. Unlike other professions where age brought respect, in this trade it demanded increasingly creative adaptations just to maintain basic survival. Yet many women navigated this transition with remarkable ingenuity, carving out niches that leveraged their hard-won experience. The transition toolkit. Seasoned workers developed specialized skills to compensate for fading youth. Memory arts, recalling clients' names, preferences, and insecurities from decades past. Political savvy, tracking which senators frequented which brothels, valuable blackmail potential. Medical knowledge, herbal remedies for everything from gout to impotence. Matchmaking, introducing wealthy patrons to promising new girls for a percentage. Alternative career paths. The fortunate pivoted to Lena, Madam, running establishments with iron fists in velvet gloves. Unlicensed physician, specializing in women's health and fertility. Perfumer, creating signature scents for younger workers. Temple attendant, serving at shrines to Venus or Isis. Wet nurse, for those who'd successfully raised their own children. The economics of aging. Financial preparations separated those who thrived from those who starved. Smart investments in perfume shops or linen stalls. Loans to younger workers with careful documentation. Underground pension systems with former coworkers. Hidden caches of jewelry and coins. The social safety net. Those without savings relied on. Former clients turned patrons if relationships were carefully maintained. Temple grain distributions with discreet donations to priests. Underground widow collectives. Occasional charity from successful former co-workers. The unexpected advantages. Age brought certain professional benefits. Less scrutiny from moralizing ediles. Ability to move through higher social circles as companions. Respect from younger workers seeking guidance. Opportunities as trainers for elite courtesans. The most successful reinvented themselves as confidants to powerful men. Go-betweens for delicate negotiations. Keepers of secrets too dangerous to write down. Cultural archivists preserving oral histories. The final irony. In their later years, many found more autonomy than they'd ever known as young beauties, genuine affection from long-term patrons, unexpected respect from society's margins, freedom to refuse undesirable clients. The wisest understood this phase as life's second act, not the tragic epilogue others assumed. Their hard-earned scars became maps they could share with younger women navigating the same treacherous waters. And in those moments of passing the torch, they discovered something resembling legacy in a world determined to deny them one. The legal status of Roman sex workers created a paradoxical existence, simultaneously indispensable and reviled, protected by law yet stripped of basic rights. This complex position shaped every aspect of their lives in ways that modern legal scholars still find fascinating. The infamia classification. Being registered as a prostitute triggered automatic infamia status, which barred testimony in court, prevented marriage with citizens, excluded from public office, forced to wear distinctive dress, the toga. Yet this same classification also provided legal recognition of their profession, allowed contracts to be enforced for free workers, granted certain tax deductions. The registration paradox. The process itself was humiliating yet provided protections. Appear before the aediles. Declare intention to prostitute oneself. Pay registration fee. Receive license for free workers. Enslaved workers were simply branded by their owners. No legal process required. Contract law surprises. Free workers could negotiate remarkable terms. Performance contracts specifying exact services. Non-compete clauses between establishments. Penalty clauses for client misbehavior. Even retirement bonuses written into long-term agreements. The courtroom dilemma. While barred from testifying, sex workers could have legal representatives, often former clients. Bring complaints through third parties. Use guild networks to pressure opponents. Taxation oddities. The vectigal tax created bizarre situations. Brothels could deduct equipment depreciation. Workers could claim business expenses for cosmetics. Even enslaved prostitutes generated tax receipts. The children question. Offspring faced particular challenges. Born free if mother was free, but stigmatized. Automatically enslaved if mother was enslaved. Frequently abandoned at the columna lactaria. Sacred prostitutes. Those attached to temples occupied a special category. Exempt from certain taxes. Allowed to wear stolas, normal women's dress. Could claim sanctuary during persecution. Military bordellos. State-sanctioned camp followers had unique privileges. Guaranteed payment scales. Military protection. Travel permits. But also strict health inspections. The retirement loophole. Some found ways to shed infamia status. Buying land, if wealthy enough. Marriage to foreigners. Loophole in some provinces. Temple service for minimum periods. Bribing officials to destroy records. The entire system functioned as a giant contradiction, simultaneously regulating and condemning, protecting and punishing. For the women living this reality, it meant constantly navigating a legal twilight zone where the same act could be either commerce or crime, depending solely on who was watching and what they stood to gain. The legacy of Roman sex workers extends far beyond their lifetimes, leaving indelible marks on language, law, and culture that still resonate today. Though history often tried to erase them, their influence seeped into the foundations of Western civilization in unexpected ways. Linguistic legacies. Modern languages still carry their imprint. Meretricious, from meretrix, describing something deceptively attractive. Prostitute, from prostituere meaning to expose publicly. Venereal, from Venus relating to sexual matters. Lupaner, from lupa still used in some Romance languages for brothels. Legal precedents. Their paradoxical status established enduring concepts. The idea of vice districts, like the Subura. Registration systems for certain professions. Tax codes for moral hazard businesses. Early labor contracts for independent workers. Architectural innovations. Brothel designs influenced later structures. The Roman cell model inspired medieval hostelries. Bathhouse layouts became blueprints for spas. Their ventilation systems informed hospital designs. Discrete back exits evolved into theater emergency exits. Medical contributions. Their herbal knowledge survived in medieval midwifery manuals, early gynecological texts, monastery healing gardens, folk remedies still used today, cultural archetypes. They established character types still seen in literature, the hooker with a heart of gold, theater, the wisecracking madam, opera, the tragic courtesan, film noir, the femme fatale, economic models. Their practices pioneered independent contractor systems, performance-based compensation, brand differentiation strategies, customer loyalty programs, feminist formulators. Though unrecognized as such, they created early women's support networks, developed proto-unions for protection, established informal credit systems, practiced forms of reproductive choice, hidden historians. Their graffiti and artifacts provide more accurate dating of events than official records, insights into colloquial Latin, evidence of trade routes, documentation of social attitudes. The ultimate irony: the very society that scorned them adopted their beauty techniques, used their medical knowledge, copied their business methods, secretly admired their freedom. Today, when we trace the origins of everything from labor laws to lingerie fashions, from contract theory to women's healthcare, we're often retracing steps first taken by these women in the shadow of the Colosseum. Their true monument isn't carved in marble. It's woven into the fabric of daily life, in words we speak, in laws we debate, in stories we still tell about power, desire, and survival against the odds.